Hello everyone, and welcome to the Sacramento Capitol. I'm Lily McKay with the Millennial Review, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Assemblyman Kiley of the 6th District, correct?
That's right.
And you are one of the youngest legislators here in the state, that's correct?
That's right, yeah. I think there's maybe a few who are a bit younger, but certainly on the younger side.
Well, it's nice to have millennial representation here in California. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up here with your interest in the Assembly, so young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think serving here in the Assembly is really a great opportunity and a privilege to have the chance to represent the folks in my district, which is where I grew up, and to try to make a difference and get California moving in the right direction.
Yes.
Certainly issues affecting millennials are central to what I'm working on here. But as far as my background, I've always had a real interest in public service. After college, I taught high school at a school in inner city LA through Teach for America, which has been a program that a lot of people in our generation have participated in at this point. I went to law school, was in private practice for a little bit, and then went and worked as a Deputy Attorney General for California, criminal prosecutor, working on appeals in felony cases. And public safety is a big focus of mine as well. So I was elected last year in November, so I'm about four and a half months into the job here. Looking forward to hopefully be able to work on issues in particular related to college affordability, the cost of living in California, economic opportunity, expanding educational opportunity, which are issues that I think are the debt crisis that are of great concern to the millennial generation and vital to the welfare of the state as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely, because a lot of the things that are happening now will end up on our shoulders later.
Yes.
Or now.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, you're also a member of the pretty recently formed Millennial Caucus. That's recent?
That's right, yeah. I'm one of the two people who's leading that effort. And we launched it, I guess it was a couple months ago.
Okay.
And
how did that kind of come to be?
Well, there's, I think, a real interest on both sides of the aisle in, really shining a spotlight on some of the issues facing millennials. And we have 11 of us in the legislature who qualify as millennials. I think we're using 1980 as the cutoff. And it's bipartisan. I think it's 7 Democrats and 4 Republicans. And our thought is, look, we're not always going to be able to agree on what the solutions are to some of the challenges and the problems that we face. But there's real value in being able to come together and focus on what those challenges are and what millennials in California are facing, and to try to give a clear picture of some of the struggles that millennials are going through, and to sort of focus on, as you mentioned before, how important it is that we provide opportunities to millennials and also attract younger people, I think, into politics and public service. And so I'm excited about the opportunities that we'll have to work together and to really bring a renewed focus to these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. How does the Millennial Caucus intend to engage with California millennials specifically?
Yeah, well, we're going to be doing events around the state and going to places where millennials can be found, like college campuses, and providing opportunities to engage with students and with younger people and to hear what's on their minds, and to also put together panels and other opportunities to put some focus onto the particular issues that tend to really be of concern to millennials. Like one example is housing. It's so expensive here in California, the highest housing costs in the state. I mean, in order to even afford a 20% down payment, you've got to save for decades at this point if you're the average recent college graduate in California. And it's driving a lot of people just out of the state entirely. It's putting the dream of home ownership certainly out of reach for a lot of people, and the rents are so high in a lot of our areas in California as well. And so it's really serving as an anchor on opportunity for a lot of young people. So that's something that we're going to be putting together events around. And you know, again, we may not, as a caucus, always agree 100% on what do we do about it, but you know, hopefully we'll be able to find some areas of consensus and at least work together to really get the ball moving in terms of you know, finding some solutions.
Absolutely. I think it doesn't really matter partisan issues as much as where are you going to live. That doesn't.
Yeah.
That's bipartisan.
Yeah,
for what millennials
absolutely.
are going to do for jobs,
Absolutely.
etc. So, while I was looking into the caucus a little bit, I stumbled upon some statistics talking about how California millennials specifically are some of the most educated. So we hold them, in, you know, specific to college degrees, we hold the most college degrees, while at the same time we are pretty underemployed and our median income is lower than perhaps previous generations who are the same age. So is that a problem? What are we going to do with that information, basically?
Well, so yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think that, you know, there are a lot of different dimensions of this. You know, one of them is that there are issues related to access to higher education right now. Okay. The UCs and the CSUs have recently raised student tuition. I think at the UCs, tuition has quadrupled, close to that since 2000.
Wow.
You know, when you combine that with the cost of housing, as we were just talking about, energy costs, which are, you know, not like anywhere else in the country like they are here. We just raised, the legislature just raised the tax on gas, which is adding a still higher burden for people in California. And then, you know, when you look at what we've done to, in terms of the business climate in this state, it's actually leading to fewer job opportunities for students once they graduate. You know, and as we see more and more businesses leaving California for states that want to encourage job creation and job growth. Just last week, we had Aerojet in the Sacramento area here, which has been a real mainstay of this region for a long time. That you know, 1,100 jobs are gone, and you know, when the jobs leave California, those are, you know, that's something that a young person could have used, a recent college graduate could have used to start their career here, to start their family here, you know, to one day maybe be able to afford a home. And you know, when we as policymakers are taking actions that send those jobs elsewhere, then we're severely limiting the opportunities that young people have. And so you know, I'm looking forward to working on finding ways that we can reverse what I view as some pretty destructive policies in that respect, and figure out, okay, how can we foster an economy that actually invites job creation. And on the education side, how do we you know, make reforms to our education system so that students are prepared for the demands of the modern workforce, and we're you know, educating students with the sort of skills that are needed for success in a modern economy. So, you know, I think that there are many different aspects of the challenges that millennials as a generation face, but I think that the overarching theme is a diminishing of opportunity that we've seen in California because of some misguided policies.
I see. And how much of that comes from the grassroots or from the ground up, or how much of it just comes from people here in the Capitol who decide that we need more taxes?
It's a great question. I think that you know, when we've had positive change in this state, and this is probably true, you know, across the country as well, it's when citizens take notice and stand up and get engaged. And you know, we've got some issues as far as the way our government works, and you know, I know that the Capitol can feel you know, distant to some people and maybe impenetrable, right? But when people come together and stand up and you know, and demand change, whether that's through you know, working on a campaign, or whether it's through you know, working on an initiative, or through running for office yourself, or just going to, you know, a town hall, or organizing a group or a civic association that's there to advocate for an issue that you care about, then you really can you know, shift the dynamic and make your voice heard. And I think that that's probably, I think that we're going to see something like that, and we're already seeing the beginnings of it here in California, where people feel like we've gone really, really far in one direction, and more people are starting to take notice, and younger folks, are taking notice too. They're saying, well, there's a lot of challenges that we face right now. There's a lot of struggles that we have, and it doesn't seem to be getting better.
Right.
And instead we have, well, now we're paying higher taxes for gas.
Right.
Know,
which is great. Okay, so then do you think a lot of young people they're taking notice? They're realizing there's a problem, and that now they're looking for a solution, essentially. So maybe these things aren't getting better that we thought would be. So what is the answer?
Yeah, and I think that it certainly is incumbent on us as policymakers to engage people as well. To try to break down the barriers that some perceive between their daily lives and the work of government. And so that's one of the things that I think that the Millennial Caucus can do, is to try to go and reach millennials where they're at, and solicit and find out what they're going through, what their issues are, what they care about, and then hopefully turn that into a dialogue that we can have, and provide greater access points to the policymaking process.
Well, that's wonderful. What do you see as the biggest issue for millennials today? So I know we talked about a bunch of them, but if you were going to say, this is the biggest thing that I think is facing millennials today, what would it be?
Well, from a policymaking point of view, I think the student debt bubble is very concerning. And the average college graduate can have trouble making those payments. It takes up a big bite out of their income, even when you're on these income-adjusted programs. And it's just another thing that constrains your ability to really build a future. So it's a multi-faceted problem. But I do think that we need to be looking for ways that we can ensure students are not coming out of college so heavily indebted. And of course, one way to do that is to stop making the tuition so high and the cost of living so high. Another way to do it is, I think, by providing greater transparency as far as the burdens that students are taking on. I think that's a good thing. But this is something that we're all going to have to work on to try to figure out, how can we, deal with this situation, because it doesn't seem to be getting better, and there are going to be all kinds of adverse consequences as you have more students coming out with more debt and having more trouble making those payments.
I see. And are you working on any specific policy things, bills or whatever, that are relating to that?
Yeah, so we have one right now that I'm co-authoring that will provide greater transparency as far as for universities, as far as the default rate for the students, their graduates, which for students entering in, this will be a useful point of information for them to know that our graduates of this college tending to get job opportunities which provide them in an economic position where they're able to make their payments. So that's a measure that I think will be pretty helpful, and that's bipartisan.
Oh, wonderful. Well, so luck with that.
Thank you.
One last question. In the digital age that we have now, there's so much information available to millennials, well, to everybody actually, not specific to millennials. Do you think that will provide greater transparency to the government and accountability, or will it just kind of bury us in a sea of misinformation?
Mm-hmm. Right, that's a really good question. And it certainly holds the promise of greater transparency. And you certainly can see that already. If you want to know what's going on with a bill in the legislature, you can go online and you can find the text of the bill, and you can see what committee it's been in. And it wasn't nearly that easy before we had these sort of resources available online. I am certainly an optimist when it comes to the capacity of technology to break down barriers between citizens and government. But we have to have the will to do that. And there have at times been some in government who you know aren't always the biggest fans of transparency.
Yes.
And you know, we've seen some you know, mischief here, where you know, you have things happen at the very end of the session. You have these gut and amend tactics. So we actually had this proposition that passed in the last election that requires a bill to be out there for 72 hours before it can be signed or before it can be passed by the legislature. So that's a good transparency measure. I was pretty troubled to see some in the legislature trying to already kind of circumvent those requirements by saying, well, it applies here but not here. So the answer to your question is, you know, absolutely. You know, the ready availability of information and the growing breadth of information that's available should, and in many ways already has been, a great tool for access to government and allowing citizens to become informed. But you know, we have a responsibility in government to make sure that we're allowing it to be used for those purposes and not standing in the way.
Absolutely. If you had any advice for millennials, what would it be?
Any advice? Well, you know, I think you know, the best advice is to not be afraid to take chances and to pursue you know, what you want to do in life, and you know, and not to give up when you run into obstacles. I have, you know, great. I have great hope that we will be able to, you know, start doing things differently here in California, and that we'll hopefully get some relief to some of the students and young people and millennials who are running into obstacles as they look to, you know, get into college and afford a college education and start their careers. So you know, I know that we have in the Capitol here have not always been of great help to you in you know, in going down that path. But I'd encourage you know, everyone out there to also always feel free to and be proactive if you have an issue that affects you in terms of government, of reaching out to your local officials, your assembly member, your senator, your representative in Congress, or you know, your city councilor if it's a local issue. I think a lot of people may I don't know, be hesitant to do that sort of thing, but you know, as a citizen, as a person in our state, that's your right, and you know, you know, this is a government that is you know, of the people. So never be afraid to make your voice heard.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
You as well.